Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which is all about the role of soft skills in the hybrid workplace. My name is Alex Young. I'm a surgeon originally and also the founder of a few edtech companies. And I've got a passion for soft skills in general, having quite recently done a TEDx talk exactly on this topic. Today's webinar is really all around soft skills in the hybrid workplace as people move back to working together again after a prolonged period of working remotely. We want to know if soft skills might be as important as it was pre-pandemic, if it's more important. And we're going to be delving in today to uncover the power of soft skills in the hybrid workplace and how you can make sure you're fostering them effectively within your own team and navigating any of those nuances that might have cropped up from transferring from an in-person working environment to remote to now hybrid and all the way back again. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Natalia Jaszczuk, who is the head of learning at LearnLight. And Natalia, I'll let you introduce yourself to everyone watching and listening.
Thank you, and congratulations on getting my name right. Also, to anyone listening, I apologize for my voice. I'm suffering from COVID right now, so you may hear me coughing every now and then. I'll do my best not to. Yes, I'm Natalia. I'm head of learning at LearnLight, which is an edtech leader in language, intercultural, and communication skills in the B2B space. And I'm responsible at LearnLight for setting the long-term strategy for our learning products and services, for bringing innovation and new technologies to improve the learning experience. And before that, I've worked in a number of roles around product development and management. So basically making sure that learning products actually work.
Absolutely amazing. So I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation today, and hopefully lots of value for everyone watching, listening, either live or on the recorded version. So just to kind of get into things, Natalia, I mean, obviously we've touched on in that introduction a couple of different scenarios, both in-person work, remote work, and now hybrid work. Specifically for the kind of hybrid workplace that we're sort of seeing at the moment, why are soft skills so essential?
Well, simply in a hybrid workplace, you have a lot less touch points than you do in a face-to-face environment, right? I'm sure we have all experienced it, and I'm happy to share my slightly painful start at my fully remote work, a year and a half ago, a bit later on. But we can't rely anymore on those sort of watercolor moments, on being able to observe our teams and create relationships in the office. We have to be much more proactive about making those connections, creating new relationships. And communication is just becoming such a critical skill. It's basically like this meta skill that covers everything else. And you have to be really consciously focused on getting the message right, on understanding what the other person is saying, on trying to pick up on those very few nonverbal cues that you may be coming across. And so to me, it's certainly not a question of are they important in a hybrid workplace. It's how important are they, and are you set up to really deliver your best on this and help your teams.
And you obviously mentioned your own experience of being in some circumstances where you're working in a hybrid environment, and then you've seen for yourself the importance that soft skills and particularly communication play. What were some of those experiences for everybody watching and listening?
Sure. So obviously before, I used to work quite a lot with remote teams. However, I was still, office-based most of the time. And when I joined LearnLight, that was, January 2021, middle of the pandemic, like third wave of COVID in London. And I was just about to start coming out of maternity leave. I had a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and my nursery closed, right? So it was a really, really difficult time to start. And we also start in a fully virtual, fully distributed company as we are. And I think it was I realized in the first weeks how much more difficult it will be for me to build strong relationships with my fully distributed team. They're based in 7 countries, and how much more conscious and proactive I have to be at asking the right questions and checking understanding and just, building those sort of bridges that naturally come in an office environment. And it was really difficult. The first few months were pretty hard, because it's not only you're trying to establish a new team, it's trying to create new strategy, but you really have to bring the team together and show that you have what it takes, to inspire everyone, to take them on the journey with you, and to really understand everyone's sort of unique qualities, what they bring, how they like working, how they like communicating. So it's certainly been, a challenging path initially, but I think it almost made for stronger relationships now because we had to be so conscious about it.
For sure. I mean, really kind of extreme examples there as well. I think, I always kind of counsel people that whenever we're looking after particularly employee well-being, that whenever work is done from home, suddenly people's home environment bleeds over even more into work than it used to. And certainly with you having a baby and having to look after a newborn child as well as everything else that's going on in the world, that must have been super stressful.
Yeah, it was. And again, that's where arguably the soft skills that the company is sort of displaying and showcasing is half of the success, right? Because if the environment wasn't as receptive to it and supportive, and people, and people's sort of emotional intelligence wasn't as developed as it was, I don't think it would have been as successful, right? So it just really shows that, you have to be really conscious about it on sort of all levels in the business, not only as an employee, but certainly as a leader, and certainly when you think about how you onboard new people and how you take those that have been with you, for many years, but perhaps in a different environment, how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep showing them that you still, you care and you bring all of those perspectives with you?
And on a kind of global level, we've seen, particularly in recent kind of weeks and months, some large companies making some quite sweeping decisions in terms of where their employees need to work from. We've obviously seen Elon Musk and Tesla, forcing people kind of into the offices so that they're not working remotely. What are some of your thoughts on just those elements of practicalities and how that relates to the training side of things?
Yeah. So, firstly, despite the challenges, I am a great believer in remote work, virtual work, or hybrid work. Partly because it just opens up so many opportunities. The border is not anymore an issue. You don't have to have people located in one city. You can really tap into the talent pool globally, basically, right? So I truly believe that this is the way to go. However, it certainly poses those challenges that we already started talking about. And certainly when it comes to training, it's also, in a way a challenge because a lot of companies are still used to, let's say, in-person training solutions, and they think that this is the most valuable element of a course. I really disagree with I think it's almost, you're looking at it from the wrong perspective. It's not about being in a room with people. It's about the human element, for example, of training, right? And you can very much still foster that connection when you're in a virtual or branded environment, but you have to be a lot more thoughtful about how you do it. It's really not about just transferring exactly, a course design or the way you would normally have to upskill people in a face-to-face environment, but you not only have to now adapt to usually much shorter attention span, a lot more distractions when you're in front of your computer, right? But also, you have an opportunity to leverage technology, right? And so this shouldn't be a barrier. It's actually an enabler, right, to do more things than you were able to do before.
And I think one of the things that always kind of fascinates me, whether it's in-person training or remote training, is that kind of key point that you touched on, which is employee engagement and kind of capturing people's very, very short attention spans. Now, obviously, kind of pre-pandemic, we had companies like Kahoot or Quizzes and some of these kind of quizzing, organizations where the whole original idea behind the company was, how can we get people to sort of focus on one thing in their learning? And they've done that, successfully using some gamified techniques. Do you think it is as simple as that in terms of engaging employees and getting them to actually learn when we're remote or hybrid or in person, or are there other things that we need to consider?
So let's start from something that maybe isn't a popular view, but learning is hard. Right? Learning is hard. It's physically hard because basically to learn anything, but especially to learn a new skill, to create a new habit. I mean, you literally need to you need to rewire your brain, right? You need to create new neural connections to make a habit stick, to sort of transpose that knowledge and skills into practice, into something that you can easily recall. So I'm always quite wary of super easy, quick solutions in learning. And it's always about picking the best out of all of those worlds or all of those situations. Certainly we need to cater for short attention spans. And, we do that, for example, through focus on micro learning, right? So it's about chunking your content, chunking your learning material into really sort of manageable few minute long activities that can be done on the go, right? And that does actually facilitate better learning. It is better to be doing things, every now and then and come back to them rather than cram everything into a short time span. However, in my opinion, you have to be really thinking about it more globally. There are some things you can easily develop in a quick, interactive activity, for example, and there's other things that you need to give, a skill practice time, right? You need to delve into scenarios. You need to immerse your learners into practical, work-based activities. You need to then also, which is always the tricky part, show how they can take that into the workplace, right? Because learning never stops in the sort of individual learning intervention. It's all about, well, can you then actually use it next day when you talk to whoever else in your team? How do you keep using that, and how do you keep practicing and creating that habit?
And I think that sort of translation aspect is so key, and particularly when we're talking about soft skills, it's something that is relatively nuanced, and typically it's sort of taught, I guess, experientially, or almost like as an apprentice, where you see how other people communicate, you figure out kind of through your own life experiences and personal beliefs what is good communication, what is poor communication. And for the most part, unless you do actually invest in yourself and dive into what makes good communication or poor communication, you are kind of learning in quite a sort of serendipitous way. And as you say, you've got to practice that, because it is nuanced, because there's things like your vocal tonality, your eye contact, picking up and using your emotional intelligence to then thoughtfully respond to people. All of these things sit under that umbrella term of communication. And just from my own sort of experience of coaching companies and people during this period, I mean, some amazing examples. And obviously I'm coming from a medical background where we do lots of communication training through medical school, and then we encounter patients and have to have some very difficult conversations at different points in people's lives. And some of the examples that I would hear from technology founders or fast growth companies were what I felt were very basic. So just to give everyone listening or watching an example, things like people asking their HR team, how do I make small talk with people on my team? Or how do I deal with someone who's been sick for a few days? Should I find out why they've been sick? And a lot of these are sort of almost a little bit humorous, because they're just basic communication skills. But with that in mind, do you think we kind of actually underestimate the need for communication skills training in our people when we're employing them?
We do, and I think that's always been the challenge behind what we call soft skills here. I mean, I'm not always a fan of the term soft skills, because I think it almost does it in injustice, like soft skills as opposed to hard skills, right? It's more what helps you progress, what are the tools you need to really to improve your performance, basically. And communication skill to me is that power skill. It's literally the skill that can take whatever in your domain, that allows you to amplify it, that allows you to bring everyone else on board with you, that allows you to truly explain and communicate how we're going to get somewhere, right? That's when you learn how to listen to other people and understand what is going to help them be their best selves. It's certainly underappreciated, because we always think that we kind of have those skills anyway, because we all communicate, right? But it doesn't mean we communicate effectively. And to me, one of the, we've been thinking, we're thinking every day, like, what is that formula, right? To really develop those skills. And to me, the example you just gave, it just shows that we're even lacking sometimes the basic self-awareness or awareness of where I am and what are the areas that I need to develop. And that's often for us the foundation. You need to understand where you are on that skills development path, before you start actually addressing it and before you start working on it, right? And then, yeah, you know, you need some kind of background knowledge and basic knowledge of what that skill is or what are various techniques, but then it's much more, again, about that conscious practice, and ideally having someone that can sort of coach you through it, or having some support that tells you if you are doing the right thing, right, and if you are improving in that skill. And that's what you don't really get, you know, when you just go about your day and you know, not consciously focus on development, or you don't really get it in e-learning either necessarily.
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, the TED talk I gave sort of a couple of months ago now was literally, it was quite a clickbait title, but it was how to change your life, learn power skills, for that exact reason. And I think it's, although we're obviously sort of talking about these type of communication skills in a work sort of scenario, they actually will improve every single part of your life. And
Absolutely.
as exactly as you say, we use them all day, every day. And it seems absolutely crazy that people aren't investing in themselves and leveling those particular skills up, where you will do that with other things. So if you're, say, for example, a salesperson or a coder, maybe you're learning some skills like how to correctly fill in your CRM, or how to learn JavaScript or something like that. But you just don't go anywhere near that communication side of things, which I would say is you know, the real crux of how that's going to improve your career.
But, you know, also to be fair to you know, everyone that's is sort of under focusing on those skills, part of it is because they're so hard to measure, and they're so hard to kind of put a framework around those skills, right? And you know, we're all, I think we would all love to have a similar framework for soft skills as we have for more technical skills, where you can very easily show how you progress from one stage to another, right? And but to me, this is almost underplaying the complexity of and sort of holistic nature of those skills. You know, it's not that if you know or are able to do or ask these 3 questions, you're kind of on level 1, and there you progress to level 2. That's where, again, you know, I'm such a believer in coaching, because it's more about the context that you're in and helping you deal with the challenges that you face, right? And so there is like a you know, there's always like a basic a sort of starting point that everyone can sort of learn about, but then it's more about, okay, on that scale, how confident are you in using this skill, right? And can we help you sort of work through that challenge with you, and actually, what is the impact that you're seeing in your workplace when you actually undergo, for example, you know, a course? That's something that I think few learning providers have cracked, and I think we're kind of there on a path at least, but there's very few people that can really show that sort of long-term impact on performance.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. And I kind of reflect back on my medical training, where a lot of our sort of communication skills training, certainly in medical school, was done in role play or simulated environments, where you are either speaking with an actor or actress, or even with some of the kind of mannequins and things like that, with someone sort of sat behind a curtain doing the voice, and you have to sort of use your own communication skills to get to a point. And the way that was, I guess, taught and assessed was there was certainly an end point where you had to, in medicine, obviously reach a diagnosis or reach a satisfactory conclusion with the patient, whether it's you're delivering news or you're explaining an operation or something like that. And then you've got someone who is kind of critiquing you against what is perceived to be a framework for that scenario. But there's probably less done on that element of, you know, your vocal tonality, your eye contact.
Sure.
That is very kind of subjectively fed back. And it'd be great to sort of, you know, get your experience of communication for sales and other programs that you have run on that coaching side, and how you feel people should structure that so that they learn most effectively.
Yeah. So firstly, what I would say is, you know, the elements that you mentioned around, you know, tonality, eye contact, and so on. Again, I'm sort of growing increasingly conscious of the fact that there is like the norm, that, or almost like the Western norm, and then also, you know, the sort of when you think of like neurodiversity and so on, all of those aspects really need to be considered, right? So I would kind of hesitate to say like there is one way that you should behave in a meeting, right? And then you add intercultural aspect to it, and figuring out, you know, how you work with someone that's in Japan, you know, and you're you know, in Spain, and all of those dimensions do make for this sort of added complexity. But to us, you know, the way we've been addressing it, you know, we have this like 5-point framework basically that we take we take our learners through in communication. In fact, in all of our courses, not only communication skills, where we just start from those basics, which you can do in your own time, and it's you sort of just learn about what that basic skill is, and you build that awareness, and we do it in quite an inductive way. So it's exposing you to situations and trying to get you to critically think, how you would behave, or what would your initial reaction be. And then only with that awareness, we take people into like a live environment with a coach where we can practice through those scenarios with that first element out of the way, because it's more about, like I said, the back and forth on understanding how you can then produce, right? Is the skills production. And then it's about giving people really clear, almost like mini scenarios that they can apply in work. And like what exactly the examples you gave, in the medical field, that's a really great a bar, basically, for us to think about in terms of communication skills, because you can talk about them all you want, but unless you have concrete scenarios and you can say what the outcome should be, and the outcome might be, you're reaching a new agreement with your with someone on your team as to, how they will approach a certain task, or by when, or you resolve a conflict that has been there for a while, right? Unless you have those outcomes in mind, you won't ever be able to say whether a skill has been developed or not. So for us, it's like, it's taking the learner on that journey and helping them understand that actually it's a lifelong journey, but we're going to take you through those first stages so you can start building those habits and start building that learning mindset, so you can keep developing, even after that learning moment is over.
I think absolutely essential. And I was just thinking, actually, while you were mentioning those examples, when I left my role as a surgeon and went sort of full time on one of the tech companies I founded, and I was wearing every single hat in the company right at the beginning. And things are getting slightly crazy. I was doing sales coaching with the sales team, and we were looking at sort of, either I would sort of sit in with people who were ramping and take notes in the background, provided the customers were happy with that, or again, if the customers were happy, recording some of those conversations for more specific coaching around some key areas. And I think one of the things that I certainly learned from that as someone who was delivering coaching was really to kind of focus on one area of the communication individually, rather than trying to coach through an entire scenario.
100%.
And I was just wondering, what's your sort of thoughts on that in terms of like actually delivering personalized coaching?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We've I think the one of the big challenges in the training industry is that we all tend to want to address the increasing need for very short courses, that do cater to people's short attention spans. And basically, we all want to deliver this, okay, in 1 hour, I'm going to make you an excellent communicator. It's just, it's not possible. Like, if anyone tells you that it's not possible, do not go on that course. So for us, it was we really literally took it to like our paper and research, and basically tried to break down, okay, well, what actually is communication? What are the individual competencies that create an excellent communicator, right? And we almost sort of ranked internally how we think those kind of skills work. And for us the absolute basic skill, the absolute essential skill is listening, right? I mean, you do not go anywhere else in communication unless you're an excellent listener. And there's different types of listening, right? So we sort of broke that down, in what situations you use which listening skill and which listening style. And I think that's when you break a skill down into tangible competencies that you can develop and you can measure, and you focus on one or two things at a time, that's when you can actually see the difference. Because otherwise, if your course is so big that it focuses on becoming an excellent communicator, this is really just kind of knowledge sharing. All you can do at that point is give someone an awareness of those various areas. You cannot drill into that individual competency, right? And this is what we're doing now, in a sort of we're just launching actually a revised portfolio of communication skills courses, and they all break down into, okay, how are you an ally, for example, to your diverse teams, right? And what does it mean to be an ally? Like, what are the actual actions? How do you roll it out, in your life, in your work, in your team, in your company? And same with active listening, okay, let's go through those 5 scenarios to use, active listening specifically. And this is how you can do it. And these are the notes you can take. And these are the points that we can then sort of go through. Have you done it? Have you not done it? And you get feedback from your peers on the course. You get feedback from the coach as well. So 100% with you on breaking this down into competencies that you can drill into and practice again and again and again.
And it's very interesting because certainly when I sort of moved from medicine to things like, sales training or business in general, whether it's customer success, marketing or internal communication, I think there are lots of commonalities and some differences. And I think one of the really sort of interesting frameworks, certainly that we would talk in medicine, which is also true for any type of communication skills training, which is, first of all, obviously you have to go through that element of sort of almost mindset change in theory and understand that you can actually improve your communication skills. And if you're someone who struggles with that, or if you're working at, say, an English speaking company and English isn't your first language, all of these things can be improved. And then there are some, what I used to call kind of crutches, where you can utilize things like kind of frameworks, or at the extreme, I wouldn't really recommend doing this, but you can write out yourself like a little script if you're particularly nervous, to ease yourself into some of these repeatable real world communication scenarios that you go into, whether it's sales and you've got your opening patter, or you've got your rehearsed kind of sales pitch, or whatever it is you're doing. That will certainly at the beginning of you improving your communication skills allow you to have a little bit of confidence, because that is structured. It's there. That someone else has potentially put it together or reviewed it with you. And by allowing you to have that sort of almost like permission and confidence, you can then enter those more difficult conversations where it's thinking about, okay, did I build rapport here? How did I actually deliver some of that sort of predetermined script or frameworks? Or how was it if the person on the other side got angry or was short of time, or whatever it was? Do you have any sort of tips or things like that for anybody listening?
So firstly, I would not discount creating those crutches. I think this is an extremely valuable step in any learning. And in for example, in our language learning part of the business, we have like flashcards is such an obvious and such a well-known tool, and it is a really powerful tool to practice, right? Those kind of learning crutches, is, again, it's a bit of an unfair term, but it absolutely helps you create good habits, right? Because it's all about practicing one thing and then getting feedback on that, and then trying to do better next time. And absolutely, we take our learners through pretty kind of set scenarios initially, that we have quite good sort of clarity as to what would be the elements that we want them to look out for, and and it's all about like setting someone up for success. So by giving, let's say 3 to 5 things that include that in your message, or consider X, Y, and Z, and then I find including an observer in that situation is an extremely powerful tool as well, right? So it's one thing that you're performing yourself, and we give you those kind of tools to help you structure your response initially. It's another thing to also get feedback from your coach, or from whatever other environment. But it's an extremely powerful tool to have a peer, for example, which you can take into your workplace and ask your colleague, someone you trust, to be that person for you later on. Again, post learning, you can actually talk to someone that is a trusted teammate, for example, or someone from another team, and ask them, hey, listen, we're going into this meeting in 2 hours. Can I ask you to just watch out for how I'm communicating X, Y, and Z, right? Or can you watch out for my body language, because I know that this is something that I got some feedback that, maybe it's not particularly, it doesn't seem like I'm engaged, and I am, but I know it's just not coming across right. So can you give me some feedback on how you think I did, I performed? And those are extremely powerful, because not only the fact that someone is observing affects your performance, and it's that understanding that, hey, actually you are being evaluated all the time. Like, people do it anyway, but we often don't consciously think about it. So once you ask someone to do it and to give you feedback, you perform better straight away, right? Or you think consciously how to apply it. So I'm a huge believer in those kind of learning crutches. It's whatever you can give a learner to initially start building a good habit before it becomes unconscious.
Couldn't agree more. And I think we said at the beginning of the conversation, learning is hard. And I'd also say that, particularly things like any skill really, but particularly communication skills, it is very scary for people because as humans, we're kind of social animals, and we don't want to feel, shunned, or people to say that our communication isn't good. But actually the way to get better is to do those hard things, have that kind of growth mindset, and actually actively seek out feedback. So I think that is just so important. But it is scary. And I think, again, that comes back to that sort of mindset piece of you've got to be willing to almost decouple your kind of ego from the skills that you're learning, and think, okay, regardless of where I sort of self-rate my communication skills, or whatever element of your communication skills you want to improve, I need to get feedback on them, and I need to sort of extract myself from that skill, and think in terms of, it's the skill that needs improving. It's not me. I'm not bad. I'm not inferior to other people, right?
Absolutely. And it's a really good point. And this sort of learning mindset or growth mindset, or whatever you want to call it, it's so critical that in fact we start, when the learner first goes onto like the digital element of our course, the first thing they learn is how we're going to take them through that course, and the explanation of the fact that of how learning actually happens. Because a lot of people don't know, how you learn best, and what are sort of the ways to foster it, and also how complex the learning process actually is. So we find that by informing our learners in advance, like, this is the journey we're going to take you on, and this is why, because, we put a tiny amount of sort of neuroscience in there, very little, but just enough so that people understand, why, what goes into the habit formation, what goes into sort of skills practice, and that really helps drive that initial motivation, and helps actually get people over what you just said, which is that discomfort with my skills being quite low. Because we think, not only we think our communication skills are good, but we definitely don't like to be challenged that our communication skills aren't good, because it's such a basic skill that we do use. We're just not really great at it. And I actually hope, I think, hybrid working, post-pandemic work, and all of that, it poses so many challenges, but it's also an opportunity, almost like that card for us to say, yeah, my skills are not great in this new environment, right? And maybe this is a way for us to be okay with it, and we can, if you want to use this as an excuse to say, okay, need to improve my communication skills in the hybrid environment, I'm totally fine with that, because it still allows you to just focus on them, right? And if you're an excellent communicator in a hybrid workplace, you'll be, a smashing one in a face-to-face scenario, because you have to take so many more things into consideration when you're not in the room with people.
I mean, what a fantastic point. And it's, I was just sort of smiling when you were saying that, because I was thinking back to 2 points really. One is, it's how important it is whenever we're delivering any type of training or course to, people in general, to first make sure that the learning outcomes are firstly relevant to the person. And then, why do people take any course? What's the incentive? Well, it's to obviously transform from where they are at the moment to what they perceive will happen when they, reach the end of that training or learning or whatever it is you're providing. And I think, as kind of, L&D experts or coaches or whoever you are on that sort of teacher end of things, it's just so important to do that. And the second point was, I was just sort of thinking back to the way that I kind of leverage and hold leverage over myself if I need to learn anything. And you're absolutely right. It is using that, what I call kind of situational weaknesses, where you think, okay, I know I've got the ability to improve anything, but I've been a little bit weak in this particular circumstance, or this particular call or meeting, or I wasn't happy with that. And that's what I'm going to focus on and improve when I have my sort of next coaching session. And I think that's a very powerful kind of mindset. It certainly has been for me, because it sort of it does 2 things. It kind of extracts you from trying to improve yourself as a whole, but it also really focuses down what you're learning into a very specific circumstance, as you say. So if it's hybrid work or remote work, it might even be, I'm not good at opening a sales conversation in a remote environment. How can I improve? And that helps your coach really sort of focus down what they want to be doing with you.
I mean, certainly, the sort of intentional learning, just sets you up for success so much more than just going on a course that someone sends you up for, right? But I mean, if I feel like if there is anyone that still doesn't think those skills are important in the hybrid workplace, I mean, it's enough to see what's happening in terms of like the movement in the labor market, right? And like great resignation, like it's been just talked about so much already, but it just shows to me, I've been sort of observing how culture seems to be changing and how people's perception of culture within a workplace is changing and is being talked about in slightly different ways now. In that, I feel like when the pandemic did is, it just highlighted excellent work cultures where there's clear focus on what it means to belong, what our company's purpose is, what are the how we communicate well, and is that understanding there, is that sense of belonging and inclusivity there. And it's really highlighted companies that do not have that strong culture and do not have strong interpersonal or soft skills at the center of how they work together, right? And that's where you see people leaving work simply because now everything is exposed that previously might have been hidden because you were in the same room. Now that the communication is happening only in that virtual meeting, and you don't have an opportunity that much to just clarify a point later on or fix something so easily as you did when you were just walking by someone's desk, that focus on like, okay, how do we get that message right, and how do we make sure that everyone understood it, and how do we proactively or in fact stop conflict before it happens, how can you get people on board, like that is just so critical. And I think some companies are definitely feeling the pain of it now, and that might be why they're asking everyone to get back to the office, because it was just easier. But you can see an employee reaction to it that we all know, we had a taste of what that good culture should be and what a good communication is, and we're all looking for that, for those environments.
And we've mentioned sort of a couple of things in terms of either e-learning or flashcards or Kahoot and Quizlet and sort of employee engagement tools. Where do you think kind of technology can really help in the future in terms of training people in communication skills?
Yeah, that's a great question, and to me, technology is always an enabler, really, right? So it's less about just focusing on the technology itself, but more about what it can do that, for example, human connection cannot do, right? So to me, technology certainly helps. For example, target someone on the go, right? Like find the 5 minutes you have to learn something new. You can, whether it's on your mobile phone or whatever else, you can just learn about something, and that gives you that really quick exposure to this like chunked learning and sort of short moments of like micro learning. What it can certainly help is it can provide very rich feedback when you don't have another person in the room, right? So for example, with sort of rising capabilities of very sort of AI systems and so on, there's a lot of feedback you can get to how you behave, to your hesitation in your voice, right? And how effective you are at getting the right message across. Technology it's almost there. I think it still will be increasing, and I certainly see this getting much better in the future. But it certainly can help you on a sort of day-to-day basis when you do not have that coach or a teammate that can give you feedback on keeping progressively improving, right? It can also help if there is actually a trainer involved in a certain solution to give that analysis, for example, on the whole group, right? And see, okay, as a group, we seem to not have done X, Y, and Z, or as a group, one person has spoken for 40 minutes of the time, and another person, 40% of the time, another person maybe 3% of the time. So it can improve all elements of a sort of learning environment. But I'd be interested to hear how you're approaching this, because I know with your company as well, this is like a big focus on how we can change learning.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed it. I think the challenge for technology as a whole, specifically when we talk around soft skills, or in fact any practical skill, really is
Yeah.
how can we take some of those I say kind of serendipitous or infrequent like learning experiences. So for example, if you have a difficult conversation with someone, or you have a sales call where either the customer is quite competitive, or they're short on time, or they've just got their own sort of idiosyncrasies that you're learning from on the job. A lot of the time those are lost unless that is kind of recorded. You go back over it, you work with the coach. And certainly one salesperson in one organization will have, just by default of having X number of sales calls per day, will have very different learning experiences than someone somewhere else, even in a different country. And so I think one of the things that technology can do is think about how can we go towards standardizing some of that and actually accelerating some of those experiences, and whether it is sort of video based scenarios that people can go through, or whether it is something a bit more sci-fi, like what one of my companies, Verti, does, which is using kind of these AI powered avatars where people
Yeah.
can work through these scenarios in their own time. Now, those aren't really ever going to replace the complete randomness of jumping on a Zoom call with a new person you've never met before, but they will allow you to sort of fail in a safe environment, and they will allow a coach to sort of observe some elements of your communication style, some elements of how you sort of approach things, again in that safe environment. And again, if you then go through something in the real world, like say again a sales call, you could potentially jump them back into one of these avatar based environments and think, okay, based on that real world experience I went through, how am I going to change how I communicate with the avatar? And then you sort of see your progress, because that is obviously kind of stored in the cloud from when you've gone through, and you can sort of see elements of progress. Now, there are limitations there with what you can do, and it should always be combined with real world coaching as well. But I think that exactly as you say, that technology being an enabler piece, if we can speed up the way that people learn soft skills, or in fact practical skills, that's massively going to help organizations and individuals. So if you can show that you're reducing your ramp time of new sales professionals, or you're showing that they are closing deals more effectively, or your SDRs or BDRs are actually booking more meetings for the rest of your sales team based on that training, that really is the pinnacle of what we want to see in terms of like learning outcomes, in my opinion.
100%. There's certainly plenty of elements that can be done faster, right, in a technology-enabled way. And I think you also highlighted the key for us. For example, we're also working on AI for language learning now, and confidence is that key element of it, right? It's how do you help a learner break through that barrier? Even in a training situation, you have so many inhibitions, right? And you don't want to fail, right? But if you fail first with technology, when you're not being judged, right, it will be a lot easier for you to perform in the live learning situation, and then finally in the real world. So I 100% with you on that.
Well, I think that's a really great note to kind of start to wrap up this webinar on. I think going back to that point of learning being scary, learning being hard, and people sort of learning at their own pace. I think again, technology has a huge role to play with reducing some of that trepidation for learners. And we know that putting people into sort of a public speaking environment, or getting them to speak in a group, it is obviously very rewarding, and that will allow people to upskill very quickly. However, it is terrifying, and that can actually put people off and make them not want to engage with the learning in the first place, just from fear. And I think, certainly from my experiences in healthcare, where when you actually get into the real world, you're speaking with real patients who are unwell, you feel responsible for them because that's your job. That stress and emotional aspect then is very, very different in how you're actually performing. And I think if we can allow people to be put through some of those scenarios with that, a similar level of stress, but with them knowing that it's okay if you fail, it's part of training, and leans into that growth mindset, I think that's really what we want to be sort of heading for in terms of a learning community trying to help people improve their communication and soft skills. But Natalia, I'll let you have the final word. Is there any other advice that you would like to sort of give to people who either they might be looking to improve their communication skills themselves, or they might be looking at how they can provide that to their people?
So if there's one thing or one starting point to mention, it would be just to start by looking at the communication breakdowns in your business, where things fail and what are the main challenges that you're facing, and then focus on upskilling your workforce specifically on those individual skills rather than, in panic, roll out something to everyone. Be quite targeted, because if you make a difference in one or two targeted communication skill, you will absolutely see a difference straight away.
Amazing. Well, fantastic advice. And hopefully everyone enjoyed the webinar today. If you do want to connect with Natalia or myself, please do so on LinkedIn. Be very happy to connect with anyone and offer any advice or value around improving communication skills or learning and development initiatives, or where technology can play a role too. I hope everyone has a fantastic remainder of the day. If you're watching this recorded at whatever time, do try and practice your communication skills in whatever scenarios you might be going through in the real world, whether at home or in work. And remember, they are skills that you can level up, and they will make a real impact on your life, both in work and at home. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you again in the next webinar in the series.
Thanks a lot.